just a renewal or if they expanded it. Maybe it's,
It's just a renewal.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
This is the first one for the clam bake, correct? Okay.
No, they've had them before. Last year, I believe, might have been their first year when they added the event center.
But if they change the terms of it, that's not considered a renewal, right? That's considered a new request or not? How do we handle those?
Are you talking about their added outside?
Or say they only had them for 2 nights a week, but they want 7 nights a week on the renewal.
Hey, Don, it's 6 o'clock, so I'll start it. Now, I think we should just ask these in real time anyways, because for the public, you know.
Right.
So, did somebody shoot Peter a text before I called the meeting to order?
I just sent him a text.
Okay.
I haven't heard back.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. This is the June 17th, 2020 remote virtual regular town council meeting for the town of Scarborough, Maine. I will call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 is roll call. Tody?
Counselor Fucci?
Here.
Counselor Hayes?
Here.
Counselor Gleisteen? Here. Counselor Katerina?
Here.
Counselor Johnson?
Here.
Counselor Hamel?
Here.
Chairman Johnson?
Here.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is general public comments. If you would like to make a public comment on anything not on the agenda, you can raise your hand now. You could also send an email to towncouncil@scarboroughmaine.org. Again, towncouncil@scarboroughmaine.org. So this is general public comments. Ms. Hamel, you are in now.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan Hamel, Bay Street and Pine Point. I'd like to speak just very briefly about the budget, which it's not on the agenda. The Board of Ed is required by state law to advocate for and protect the interests of our students. Every decision they make must be through, quote, the lens of what is in the best interest of the students and the educational program, unquote, as described in the Maine School Board Association Handbook, a document given to all newly elected school board members. The ability of the taxpayer to foot the bill is not the primary concern of the BOE. Serving the best interests of the student means that the BOE strives to maximize school funding for the programs they deem are best for the students. In a world of good, better, best, the BOE will always want the best, and they should. We all should. The inherent conflict here is that the schools cannot decide this alone. By law, the town council can recommend, but the public decides what funding is acceptable. This may require us to make do and decide what is good enough, especially in years like this one. We face so many competing demands on our scarce funds, on our tax dollars every year. We simply cannot and we should not give the schools everything they request. We can't always get what we want, but if we try and try, hopefully we will get what we need. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Anybody else like to raise their hand? None? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. With that, item number 5 is approval of the minutes. I don't believe they're ready yet, Tody, is that correct? Okay, so I'm going to skip item number 5. Item number 6 is adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Hamel, do you have an adjustment to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to request that the town manager's update be moved to the top of the order, please. Thank you.
Without objection, I will change it. Item number 7 is items to be signed. I will sign those in person when I'm at town hall next. So before we go on to our public hearing, we're going to do item number 10, which is the town manager's report. Mr. Hall?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Afraid I may disappoint tonight. I've been really immersed in budget, and it does seem like we're meeting quite often these days. So not much new, but I will provide a couple of updates. Regarding reopening of our town and our operations here, just a couple of updates from Town Hall. A reminder that we remain on a 3-day work schedule, Monday, open to the public, that is, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That started May 27th and continues on, obviously, through the end of July. I really want to acknowledge the great work on the part of my staff. It appears, based on just observation today, that we've kind of worked through what some of the pent-up demand. There's still a brisk demand for our service, but the lines seem to be much more manageable now. And so that's good for our residents, but also good for staff, because there were many days where there simply wasn't a moment to themselves. And so I really credit just the great attitude they've had working through some pretty tough conditions. The council might be interested. I've been updating finance right along on a weekly basis regarding some of our business activity. Excise tax has been an area of great interest for good reason. It's our second largest it's our largest non-property tax revenue source. And just reporting on the period from May 27th through last Friday, June 12th, we've collected $434,000 in our office here for excise taxes, and another $183,000 through rapid renewal. So I reported to finance last night. At this point, I expect we will be making budget in the current year, which is a huge source of interest for, again, good reason. And so things are trending in a good fashion that way. The clerk's office has equally been very busy. Tody, many days is by herself. For anyone who's been in town hall, she is chef, cook, and bottle washer, handling an unprecedented amount of absentee ballot requests. And on top of that, we have beach passes for sale, which seem to be a fairly hot commodity as well. So all in all, folks are doing a tremendous job, as we've seen over the last 3 months, really complying with good safety practices. We've had no issues with the public in terms of face coverings, and everyone seems to be patient as they wait to do their business here. So we're very thankful for that. Our beaches, the lots have been completely open for about 2 weeks now. Starting this Friday, June 19th, we will have staff, those are parking attendants, and our bathroom facilities will be open as well. So for all intents and purposes, we are open for business going forward. In addition, many of our outdoor recreation facilities here at Town Hall and around town have opened up. Tennis restrictions opened up last week. I was reminded that we did not lift those for pickleball. We've done that today. And we'll be opening the turf area for just general use. We're going to hold off on taking reservations for group use for a bit more, but these facilities will be open for the general public to use them going forward. With respect to budget, there was a finance committee last night. I suspect Councilor Hayes will provide some more detail later on. It does appear that there will be a fairly detailed set of recommendations coming forward. There's an additional meeting for Friday morning at 10 o'clock to kind of check in on those final details. And I'm very thankful that we had an extra week to work on this. Otherwise, we would be considering second reading tonight, and I think that would have been certainly far too soon. So I'm thankful for your willingness to push that another week. That's really helpful. Again, I want to acknowledge the efforts on part of my staff. Many of you don't have the occasion to be dealing with them, and that's really that's understandable. But I can tell you, to a person, they have really been focused on understanding the severity of the situation, really adopting a can-do attitude, and doing everything that I've asked of them. So I'm forever thankful for their support through all this as well. Another piece I'll just update you on, as you're aware, we have 75 or 6 of our employees in the Workshare program. that has been anything but smooth. We had maybe over-optimistic expectations, but DOL led us that way. We've had folks that went 3 and 4 weeks without any processing of claims. And so that's been a source of obvious frustration, and I regret any of those hardships. I think we've worked through those. This week, things seem to have opened up a bit, but it's been anything but easy for staff that have been subjected to that program. The last thing I'll just update you on is elections. Tony can give you more particulars, but we are dealing with unprecedented numbers of requests for absentees for obvious reasons. Tony, starting this week, has staff in here assisting her in working through that process, and it looks like we're starting to make a little headway into that backlog. And we're also thankful that we have the access of chambers A and B through this period. I honestly don't think we could do this safely for staff and for the public without the comfort of that wider space. So thank you for that accommodation. We also did receive state guidance regarding how to conduct safe elections. A lot of the things aren't great surprises, but there's some particulars that we need to work through given some of our logistical challenges at the high school. Again, we have the free reign, so to speak, of that facility, and that's going to help us be able to manage the crowds. So in spite of what appears to be a very heavy absentee process, we expect that we'll still be dealing with 3,000 or 4,000 people on election day itself. So we need to have proper procedures and staff and precautions in place to deal with that volume. The last thing I'll just mention, again, I've mentioned this in passing to finance. The council may recall 3 or 4 months ago, we came to you and sought and received authorization to do some advanced refunding of bonds. In the end, the markets changed very quickly. This is, my recollection is it was in late February, early March, right at the doorstep of this pandemic, and the market started to get a little shaky, and the prospect didn't look good. So we did not actually exercise that authorization. Just this week, I received notice from our financial advisor that things appear to have turned again. And what's different about this time is that we're uniquely positioned to act quickly. Just last month, we went out through our normal bond sales. So we have our official statement really complete, just needs to be updated slightly. And our ratings have been recently reviewed, so we can act very quickly. And in fact, we're planning on going to sale for about $25 million of bonds second week of July. And we're confident enough that I brought forward some savings that the Finance Committee considered, and I think will be part of your recommendation you consider next week. Those savings are split just about equally between the town and the school. That's just the way that debt is kept. So that's some last late good news, so to speak, on all fronts, and it certainly helps what has been a challenging budget year. It's kind of a final correction that's going to help us, I think, stay in keeping with what the council, I'll say, decided on, but by consensus last week in terms of your budget workshop. So things seem to be trending right to that spot, and I'm very pleased that it appears as though some of the critical pieces that were some thought weren't adequately provided for are at this point. And so I'm hopeful we're going to be ending at a good spot here. I think one thing I can say on behalf of everyone interested in the budget is we would all like this to get passed in the first reading. And so I'm very hopeful that everyone rallies the troops and can see the process for what it was and the product for what it is, and can find ways to support this budget. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, with no questions, doesn't look so. Okay. Oh, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, Tom, related to the absentee ballots, I was stopped in the park today and somebody says, I have my absentee ballot. And the question is, do I approve the budget? And he asked me, what are the numbers in the budget? So I'm assuming that we're passing some information along with the ballot?
No, as you know, the final budget vote will be a week from tonight, the 24th. So
correct. Are we letting folks know that? Because I don't think everybody fully understands that.
Well, we are, as we as we distribute them, I believe, Tony, you have a mailer that goes in the items we mail to folks.
Yes.
We had a highlight in our e-newsletter on this issue.
Mhm.
So the instructions are, do not return your ballot until June 25th at the earliest, once that number is known.
Okay.
And just this is not like
So
from my short time on the council, I've been through this once or twice as well. So this is not unusual, so to speak.
Correct. It's not
Right.
unusual.
Okay, before I move, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councilor Hamel.
We spent a lot of time on this talking, with town manager and also the town clerk. So, this is a concern, no doubt. This year in particular, where there's so many things going on, whatever else we can do to reinforce this, to remind people, because there is a problem. If they turn it in too soon, the ballot could be disqualified. Now, I understand that's never happened, at least in Tody's experience. However,
That's correct.
this year, I just think it would be very helpful to keep reinforcing that every opportunity. Thank you.
People have been very understanding when they came in today and the other day when we start issuing. We explained to them the situation, and they're fine taking the ballots home with them, not to return them until the 25th. So.
Thank you. Tody, before I move on to order number 20052, is this just the public hearing? Because the way it's worded on the agenda.
Yeah, and I apologize. There is action on it as well.
Okay,
I
so I
should-
just wanted to make sure before.
Yes, public
Okay.
hearing and action. My
Okay.
apologies. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I will read it accordingly then. So this is order number 20052, a 6 p.m. public hearing and approval, move to approval on the following renewal request for a special amusement permit from, and there's a list, so bear with me, the Black Point Inn located at 510 Black Point Road, Bailey's Campground located at 274 Pine Point Road, Beech Ridge Barn located at 21 Beech Ridge Road, the Clam Bake Incorporated located at 252 Pine Point Road, Dunstan Tap and Table located at 5 Stewart Drive, Flaherty's Event Barn located at 123 Payne Road, the Landing at Pine Point located at 353 Pine Point Road, the Libby Mitchell Post 76 located at 4 Manson Libby Road, the Loyal Order of the Moose located at 19 Spring Street, Higgins Beach Inn located at 34 Ocean Avenue, and Nonsuch River Brewing located at 201 Gorham Road. So I'm going to have the public hearing first. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to any of these special amusement permits? There is none of no. Oh, we do have one. Excuse me. Mr. Smith, you are live.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry, this is my first one of these things. So yeah, I'm commenting about the one for Bailey's. I live right near the resort, and per their website, there are vehemently flaunting all of the COVID restrictions in terms of having, out-of-state guests and quarantining themselves and stuff like that. And my question is, they're going to have live music, which I'm not opposed to, but they're going to make no attempt at all for any sort of social distancing. Aren't we just bringing upon ourselves the risk of a giant hotspot where you already have, hundreds of people coming from various different states all over the Northeast there, and now we're going to have them having live music events, with everyone close together and then sending them all about their way and into our community.
Thank you, sir. Are there any others? Mr. or Mrs. Weber, I don't know which one it is, so excuse me. You guys are live. You are on mute. Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
Are we good?
You're good. You got it. Yep.
This is, I'm Susan Weber, and my husband Bill's here with me as well. We are residents of 14 Ross Road. We are abutting Bailey's Campground. Bailey's had music for a good long time. We are particularly concerned because the volume has been increasing and increasing. It is to the point now when we're at our house, well, you used to be able to sit on the deck and maybe enjoy some of their music. It's so loud now that we literally shut up our house and have to sit in a house without air conditioning during the warm weather. The karaoke that they do there is, for lack of a better word, I guess it's extremely loud and annoying. They seem to let children run amok with the karaoke machine, and there's just a lot of, it seems like, not consideration for the neighbors in that area, and it doesn't end. And we get it every day of the week. They did not always do it every day of the week. Now we're 7 days a week, longer and louder. And we just are really concerned that there's not any control. If you pass it, we're not opposing that they need entertainment. That's fine. It's just that who monitors the volume? I mean, I know neighbors have called the police and, and it's like not really what you want to do. The Baileys have been good neighbors. It's just, how do we get a little bit consideration? They have their amphitheater. It's kind of facing neighborhoods, if you will, instead of being maybe placed farther back or into their property where maybe it would be less of a noise, or, go out over the marsh or something. Seems to just resonate everything. And we're just really concerned about it and just don't know what controls would be in place for that, without us feeling like being a bad neighbor and calling police or whatever,
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there any others? Okay, do I have Tony, do we split the question now or after it's on the floor?
You have to put it on the floor.
Okay, is there a motion to put it on the floor?
So move.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I'd like to motion to split this order into two pieces. One to address Bailey's Campground separately, and the other to address all of the other applicants.
Okay, and does that need a second, Tony?
Yes.
Or do I? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Second.
And discussion along splitting the question. So if you're at home right now, we are splitting this from one action to two different actions. So Bailey's Campground has its own discussion, its own action. Councilor Johnson, discussion?
No, just wondering, is Bailey's the only outdoor renewal here on this list?
Excuse me, can we vote to divide the question first?
Yep, we can.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I'm going to have you just call the divide right now, Tony. That way we'll get
Okay.
it over with. Yep.
Councilor Cucci,
Yes.
Councilor Hayes,
Yes.
Councilor Gleisteen,
Yes.
Councilor Katarina,
Yes.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes,
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Now you can discuss this.
Thank you. So we will talk about the wholesale order first. So we're going to talk about everybody but Bailey's. Or I'm sorry, Tony, can we not?
I think you have to discuss and decide on the
Just
divide.
split one out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that being the case, we are currently discussing the Bailey's Campground special amusement permit. And is there any Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I just thought I should explain why I wanted to split this one. And it wasn't due to the public comment, but it was more because they were the only one that had actually filled out the portion of the application that requested or tried to identify why they should be exempted from the Good Neighbor ordinance. And I thought that because of that, it should be discussed on its own merits. Where the other ones, the way I read it, they were not requesting to be exempted from the Good Neighbor ordinance.
Great. Thank you. Is any discussion on the Bailey's item? Councilor Gleisteen?
Yes. So I think, this issue, and I think the speaker addressed it eloquently, and there are others who are close by who also, I think have contacted individual counselors as well. And if you go back to past council meetings, this has definitely been an issue. I talked to one of the past counselors because I've not been able to actually hear it myself. So the resident described it, but I also went to hear from a past counselor who went to the location at a neighbor's house. And she describes, very similar that even inside with all the doors closed in this person's house, I believe it's in their basement, it was difficult to carry on a conversation. And, we're all sensitive now to the needs of businesses, that are trying to get up and running again. But I think we have an obligation to see that the neighbors are protected. And if we just year after year give an exemption to the good neighbor ordinance, then there's really no reason for Bailey's to work with the neighbors. And I think the other commenter, brought up a good question. This year there's questions around how events, might transpire. And so I wanted to, hopefully table this tonight and ask that someone, either Tom or someone else from town staff, have Bailey's representative and a couple of the close neighbors in and see if there's some resolution that could come back. Because right now the answer seems to be, we give it to them. Unfortunately, there's nothing in there about how many decibels that you can have, how loud it can be. My understanding is that the police are called, but the police instantly say, well, they have an exemption. And so even when the hours are different, the police just really don't have time to deal with it. And, I'm sure the Baileys are good neighbors, and I'm sure the neighbors are good neighbors. I think we're kind of the people in the middle here that, need to make sure that they're talking to each other. And there's someone on council that, should remain nameless because I won't speak for him, but they were describing to me kind of a similar incident with their neighbor under a different circumstance, and they were able to work something out with that neighbor. I think in a way, by granting the exemption, what we're doing is we're taking away the opportunity to have people work together to work out a solution. And maybe for a few events a year or a one or two of request, then, it's fine. But we're requesting we're granting a long period of time, 7 nights a week. And I think that's too much for exempting the good neighbor ordinance.
Just a point of information, Tony, to help clarify. If we deny this tonight, what is the reapplication process?
They can appeal.
They can appeal.
Yeah. The council has the, they can imply certain, if they want them to stop at 9, they can put that in there, or 8. I know with Higgins Beach, there is a clause on their permit that they have to end their music by 8 p.m.
And
so the council can implement a condition on the license.
And what does an appeal look like? How does that look like? Resubmit
The appeal is, they would have to submit in writing and it would come back to the council.
Gotcha.
They have 15 days. Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Caterina?
Tony,
You put
You're
yourself
on mute.
I forget. I'm working from 2 screens here, so I'm keep losing my little thing. Anyway, Tony,
Yes.
is this the only one that's 7 days? As many hours as they are asking for, or are they up there with anyone else? Because this does. I agree with Councilor Gleisten. 7 days a week is like, give me a break.
The only other one, and it's not all 7 days, is the landing. It depends on when they schedule their events. Other than that, Bailey's is the only one that has something 7 days a week.
I would be fine, frankly, saying, no, you can't do 7 days. Give us something else. So that's just what I'm going to throw out there.
Councilor Hayes?
Yeah, and I guess this is a question for either the town manager or Tony. Is just, it sounds like they have had a long-standing exemption. What's sort of the history of that? Does anybody else have an exemption? What was our rationale back in time when we've granted them previously? And what's changed or what has not changed since what we've historically done?
Well, the Good Neighbors ordinance has only been, what, a couple years?
Yeah, a
3
couple years,
years. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we've never had this condition or this ordinance in place until 3 years ago.
Right.
that
So
is
it
fairly
sounded
new.
like, but it sounded like they have had this exemption since the ordinance has been in place. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And so what was the original conversation, conditions? Does anybody recall what prior councils, what they were thinking by granting the exemption?
I don't think there was any discussion until last year, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember any discussions.
No, it wasn't until their application last year.
And then I kind of build on that as a second question. I know, I know Bailey's, I've gotten several calls. We've had this conversation before. Are there any other of the entities on the list that we've had the same sort of level of concern of neighbors and others in the community?
The only one I can think of was last year was the None Such Brewing, but I believe we didn't hear anything from this on the renewal this year when I sent out the notices. And I believe that they worked with the neighbors, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. The owners worked with the neighbors. But on other ones, I sent you an email that the Garage Barbecue and the Bait Shed and O'Reilly's Cure, they are not seeking renewal. So there was last year, I believe, discussion on those.
On those, yes, I remember those two.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not O'Reilly's, but the other two, yes.
Yep.
The only
Thank
other one I remember is Salty Bay. They're not on this list, but we've had issues at that location as well.
And I believe they pulled their application last year when they submitted it, and they found that there were some issues, so they pulled it.
Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Cucci.
Yeah, I have a point of information, but first I want to let you know that I've got personal experience. My daughter used to live at 10 Ross Road. So when I would go visit her, I would sit out by the fire pit and be entertained, which was all right. But I remembered, I thought at that time it'd only be in 3 days a week. So it was the 7 days a week. Historically, that's what they've done.
Ooh. I don't have their files, so I think it's just been within the last, I want to say 4 years, 3 or 4 years that they've done the 7 days a week.
Well, my point of information was, my understanding is when we have two ordinances that address the same item, it's the most restrictive ordinance that overrides. Is that correct? I do believe that's in the charter and it's a Maine state statute. No?
Councillor, could you just state the question again?
I think when we have two ordinances that are addressing the same item, it's the most restrictive ordinance applies.
I would generally agree with that, but what are the two ordinances that are in conflict? I'm not following that.
Well, the special amusements ordinance and the good neighbor ordinance.
Special amusement, I believe, is a state statute and not a town ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where you get the play between the two.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why it gets, every time we do this every year, this same
Yes.
confusion comes up.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so one's a state and we just adopted it at the municipality?
Yep. And then part of that is specific to the state. When we grant, we must grant it if it doesn't violate any of our ordinances. So the theory is right now they are violating our ordinance, so they're asking for us for a forgiveness of violating our ordinance.
Okay.
Hence why we're talking about this one separately.
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Cucci?
Yeah, so I've got some experience with this. I actually hold a special amusement permit in Old Orchard and a liquor license, and as do my neighbors, as Councillor Gleistein has mentioned. And it's been a long progression. So my family's been here for a long time. The neighbors have been here for a long time. About 35 years ago, somebody had an idea to start playing live music on the beach on Sunday afternoons. And we were supportive, thought it was a great idea, and still think it's a good idea. But what that progressed into was, shows 3 times a day, indoors and out until 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's when it became, I guess, a source of frustration for some of our guests at the hotel. We've kind of had over time, figured out how to make it work with, the neighbors, us included, both moving a little bit to help each other do as good as we could. So I say that because the Good Neighbor Ordinance, the way that it's written, you can do what you want to do, as long as you're not bugging the neighbors, right? And for a property the size of Bailey's, if you put any sound engineering into the performances and locate your speakers appropriately, there's no reason that a neighbor should hear what's going on there. I think it should be relatively easy to comply with the good neighbor ordinance if there's an effort there. So that's where I wanted this one to be split out, but also to give the neighbors some leg to stand on, because if we exempt them from the ordinance, then there's no enforcement that can happen there. Whereas I think by making it clear that we're not exempting them from the ordinance, that it gives the neighbors an opportunity to talk and to figure out what might work or make sense. So that's, I just wanted to share that. And that's kind of where I believe, Tony, that we can make it clear that if we approve this ordinance, that it does not exempt them from the good neighbor ordinance. Is that correct? I'm sorry. There's motorcycles going by in the background.
Okay. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I wasn't quite
So
sure what was going on.
We could make it clear as a council, should we approve this request, that it does not absolve them from the good neighbor ordinance, right? We could approve it with that clarification.
Yes, you could put that condition.
Okay.
So essentially, we would strike all the language that's on the application that the applicant has filled out.
The portion where it asks why they should be
On line 7.
Yeah. Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I've had a number of conversations with people who live on Ross Road. Also, I have relatives who live on Pine Point Road. They're not far from the entrance of the campground. So, and the noise issues are well known. And so I just, I have problems with the request, the renewal request at several levels. I think most of the councilors have covered them in one fashion or another. I would prefer having this get sent back to them to have it be reworked and resubmitted. But the way it stands now, even if we were to remove the part that is difficult for us in terms of the disregard for the good neighbor ordinance, I think that it needs to be sent back to the parties, and there needs to be some consideration shown on the applicant to want to do something about it.
And just to add a little bit of my personal commentary to that, Councilor Hamel, I agree with that. I think the best way to do that might be to deny this application instead of tabling it, because that is a pretty clear signal. That's what we want. I feel like this is an area where gray might not help the parties move forward, so to speak. The fact that there is an appeal process, to me, the way this could play out for the benefit of everybody is they come back and say, okay, we've worked with the neighbors, here's our appeal. I sense if we table it, perhaps that's not giving the weight behind it that it might need to actually come to a solution between them and the neighbors. That's my sense right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree too. I mean, I would support denying this particular application and they can come back.
Yep. Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I was wondering, the appeal process is back to the town council, is that correct? Doesn't go anywhere else?
That's correct.
Okay, so do you think it might be wise to make some suggestions to the applicants so they don't just come back with a removal of the good neighbor policy? I mean, because I personally have an issue of 7 days a week and after 8 p.m. That's just my personal opinion.
Right, but as long as they're not violating the good neighbor policy, we can't prevent that. So really what we're saying is we're not allowing you to violate the good neighbor policy. If they came back and reworked everything, like let's say they waved their magic wand and reworked everything, they could do that they could do 7 days a week as long as the people 200 feet away from them couldn't hear them. Right? Like that's perfectly within their rights.
Yep. Yep.
So I think what we're really denying here is any waiver or any budging on the good neighbor policy.
Okay.
Did that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call a vote, Tony.
Well, let's put the motion on the floor.
I thought it already was by him splitting. I'm sorry.
No, that was one. Now you have to make a motion to either deny or pass, or whatever the council's going to do.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So is there
That's
a
right.
motion to approve?
This particular, just
Yeah.
the Bailey's one?
Yeah.
I would make a motion that we deny the.
Can we make a motion to approve? That way it's just in
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the Bailey's application for whatever it is, special amusement permit.
Mhm.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
I'm going to skip the conversation. And Tony, you want to go ahead and call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
No.
Counselor Hayes,
No.
Counselor Glystein,
No,
Counselor Katarina,
No,
Counselor Johnson,
No,
Counselor Hamel,
No,
and Chairman Johnson.
No.
It was unanimous to deny.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the wholesale lot that I have listed off earlier. I believe that's on the floor. Is that correct, Tony? So
That
I'm just
is.
going, yep. So I'm just going to go into conversation about the rest. Anybody? Okay, Tony, do you want to call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
yes,
Counselor Katarina,
yes,
Counselor Johnson,
yes,
Counselor Hamel,
no,
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
It passes 6-1.
Councilor Hamel, I apologize if you wanted to say something there and I skipped you. I didn't think.
okay. Did I still get a chance to say something or not?
You know what? Yeah, if you want to, yes. Just because I did not mean to do that to you.
Yeah, there was one in there that that I had an issue with, so that we did not get a chance to separate that out. So that's the reason for my no vote.
Okay, all right. Again, my apologies there. That was not intentional. On to new business is order number 20053. It's the first reading and refer to the planning board, the proposed amendments to chapter 405, the town of Scarborough zoning ordinance, section 9, performance standards, subsection P. Jean Marie, I'm going to share the screen while you tee it up. Is that okay?
yeah, oh, good, because then
Yeah.
I don't have to go back and forth between my mute and whatever. This is the roosters, right?
This is the roosters.
Basically, what this ordinance does, it bans roosters in all sections of town except for lots in the rural farm or the RF zone that have at least 80,000 square feet, which is 2 acres. So roosters can only be in the RF zone on acres of on lots of 2 acres or more.
Okay. And is there anybody from the public that would like to discuss this or comment on it? Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
This went through ordinance, and it's time to vote on it. So
Councilor Glystein?
yeah, I mean, I saw it go through ordinance. I didn't hear from anybody on this. I think you spoke to it a little bit, Paul. And, as far as I know, I haven't heard anyone say that this is going to cause a hardship. I hope, people have learned to speak up if something is, hopefully they have, but ordinance looked at it and it seems like the way to go to me.
I've had 2 calls directly to me that have been in support of this. So
Hmm.
there's been some feedback. Okay, Tony, you want to call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes, Counselor Glystein,
Yes,
Counselor Katarina,
yes,
Counselor Johnson,
yes,
Counselor Hamel,
Yes,
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
It was unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, next we have order number 20054, first reading and a scheduled public hearing on the proposed amendments to chapter 612 Town of Scarborough ordinance creating rules and regulations for the use of parks and recreational facilities, section 1 in the definitions. And Jean Marie, I will share this as well, if that helps you at all.
yeah. I believe this is the one where we added e-cigarettes and vape pens because we don't allow smoking on the beaches. Yeah, it's under 1C here, tobacco. We added e-cigarettes and vape pens. And again, this was been through ordinance and here it is.
Is there any members of the public that would like to speak to this? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Glystein?
yeah, this one there was a no smoking policy in town, and there's also state laws, and so ordinance looked at it and to figure out where it might fit. It turned out to be much simpler than we thought, but for people who have asked the question, Jean Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but by state law, marijuana is banned on the beaches, so we didn't need to.
Right.
We didn't need to include that. There was a place for this where it could already fit, so this turned out to be a very simple
Yeah.
fix.
Yep. Thank you for that explanation, Betsy. That's right on.
Just to clarify, this would really ban it in all parks, and beaches are considered parks. So
Yes.
it's not just limited to beaches.
Any more? Okay, Tony?
Counselor Cucci?
Yes.
Counselor Hayes?
Yes.
Counselor Gleisteen?
Yes.
Counselor Katarina?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
It was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Order number 20055 is an act on request to approve an interlocal agreement for animal control officer services between the town of Scarborough and the city of Westbrook, and authorize the town manager to sign any and all documents. Tom?
Yes, somewhat fortuitous. A member of Finance Committee, I don't know who, you can identify yourself, had inquired generally about the potential sharing services early on in the finance discussion. Councilor Hayes is raising his hands. And as luck would have it, we had just started discussions with the city of Westbrook. I believe as part of some of their budget decisions. I don't know all the particulars, but they were without animal control officer. And we're seeking a partner, and we were ready, willing, and able, so to speak. So essentially, this is it's a one-year trial. We're going to check in mid-year just to see how it's going, and then it goes on an automatic renewal. But essentially, fairly simple. They'll be covering 50% of the cost. That's for wage benefit and also vehicle. We've had good conversations with our animal control officer, who feels up to the challenge to handle these duties in both towns. So we're very pleased. I would just mention, for the council's benefit and the public, we also have a shared services agreement for our harbor master with Cape Elizabeth, and with dispatch, full dispatch services for Old Orchard Beach, and PSAP services for Buxton. So I'm proud of the fact that we are in the shared services mindset, and taking advantage of every opportunity that presents itself.
Thanks, Tom. Any members of the public want to speak to this before? Okay, with that being said, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Hamel and then Councilor Gleising.
This is a big win. I think this is a creative way to make good use of a resource. It's a model that's been in place in other areas, as Tom has outlined. So, you know, credit to the initiative and credit to the effort and the timeliness as well. And savings are always welcome. And perhaps it gives us a look forward in terms of what we might be looking at in terms of other services. One caution I would say is that there's, I think, sometimes a tendency to sort of, you know, go into the business of being a service provider. So I'd say we want to be maybe a little cautious about that, but this is an unqualified big one in my mind.
Thank you. Councilor Gleisting.
Yes, so this is sort of a logistical question, and it's, I don't mean any, it's anecdotal. I know I've called before and never gotten a call back. So I'm just wondering what the mechanism is for how calls are, you know, going to come in, and then how calls are going to be managed, and what the follow-up is going to be. I too, you know, I'm glad to see this, but I'm just wondering if any of the logistics have been worked out.
I personally have not been party to those discussions, but I presume residents of each community will access these services by calling their local dispatch. And then there's procedures in place to bring in the animal control officer. I think given the severity of the situation, it may be a patrol officer responding immediately if it requires immediate attention. Very often, depending on the time and circumstance, the animal control officer is not able to respond immediately. And so admittedly, there'll be some growing pains to work out those details, but we believe that we'll be able to provide the level of service that both communities demand. I do see Liam Gallagher here, who has been a bit closer to the conversation than I am. If it pleases the council, perhaps you could answer it, but I'm not sure if he knows that level of detail, frankly.
So that's the non-emergency number for police is the right number,
That
or?
would be ideal, but I suspect some folks do access the service by way of 911 as well, just because they don't know the non-emergency, but that would be our preference, yes.
And Tom, just as a side note, they are currently furloughed on Mondays and Fridays through July, correct?
That position that's one of the only positions in the police department other than the clerical and support staff. And that in part, I think suggests why we believe we're able to share some of those services within a 40-hour work week.
It was a little embarrassing to call last Monday as the chair of the council and had to be informed that the animal control was furloughed. So
I hope your problem was addressed.
yeah.
My call was months ago, not during the furlough, but anyway, yeah, I just need to know what that process was. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Gleisting,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, next is order number 20056, act on the request to ratify a one-year contract with the Scarborough Professional Firefighters Association, IAFF Local 3894, and authorize the town manager to sign any and all documents. I think we've lived this quite a bit, but Tom, do you want to just give us a brief intro?
Very quickly, the backstory, the history, this contract is due to expire at the end of this month. We began the normal negotiation process for a multi-year contract right about the time the pandemic emerged. And so fairly quickly, we've been able to pivot and have good positive conversations. The council's been party to some of those to really reset things and look at a one-year contract. And that's what's before you this evening for ratification. This will allow us to get to a different point in time where both parties will know more about the future. The salient provisions are, it provides for a 2.5% cost of living increase that would be effective January 1st. So it's 6 months of that increase. There's also funding of their health retirement account. And it implements the lieutenant pay schedule or scale, which is actually to the town's benefit. We actually save some money through that action. So we highly recommend you consider this because I've included it in the Finance Committee's recommendation already.
Thanks, Tom. Any members of the public before we discuss? Okay, can I get a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Tony? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Hamel, please.
Yes, again, I think this, we've talked about this previously. It's great work and particularly good work on the part of the parties, and the negotiating team, and bringing it forward quickly and trying to, encourage us to understand the benefits of it. It's not insignificant in terms of the amount of money, and we were hopeful that it would set a pattern for our partners on the school side of the house to try to follow suit. That to this date has still not happened. And that has been, and I'm saying this to be kind, profoundly disappointing. So we're not done yet, but hopefully there's still time for others to try to follow this a good example. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel. Any others?
I just failed to mention that this is the third union that has stepped up. The difference with this union is that, again, we were engaged in a multi-year contract negotiation, and I think they saw some of the leadership other unions have put forward, and really saw an opportunity for them to be part of the solution here. So very thankful for their recognition of the circumstance.
Councilor Hayes?
Yeah, and just kind of pile on or add to what Council Hamel and the town manager, Tom Hall. Tom, is it correct in saying at this point, every single town employee has taken some type of contribution on COLA to try to help us navigate through these times?
Yes, all non-union folks have no COLA in next year, and all unions at this point would be half-year COLA.
And is it fair to say no one on the school side, either the administration or the teachers, have taken any adjustments for COLA?
The only one I'm aware of, and I don't have firsthand knowledge, is the superintendent's salary, but I'm not aware of any others beyond that.
Thank you.
Any others? Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Gleisteen,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes,
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Item number 8 is non-action items. There are no non-action items. Item number 9 is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. I'm going to start with Counselor Gleisteen and go clockwise in my mind.
So the Senior Advisory Committee did meet via Zoom. It was an informal meeting, a workshop. We had myself, 2 members and 4 staff attend, but there was good discussion about how to potentially move forward, because it was acknowledged that this programming as it is currently utilized really serves an older set of the seniors. So, there are some things happening, that hopefully will move forward, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be challenging.
Thanks, Counselor Gleisteen. Counselor Hamel?
nothing to report.
Thank you. Counselor Hayes?
Yeah, I think it was touched on at the top of the evening in the town manager's report. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of work by lots of different parties. So as we have said, it's really a challenging time. I will report that the finance committees have been meeting pretty consistently. We did have a workshop on June 9th last week, where the council kind of came to consensus and arrived at a point that we felt comfortable with, which is about an overall increase in the mill rate of about 1.16%. There's been some additional work done over the past week. There were some issues that we were trying to work collectively toward. We did have a finance committee meeting yesterday of the town council. Our goal was to come up with final recommendations that we can share with the full town council, which we will be doing. I think our goal, Tom, will be have that go out in the materials for the agenda this Friday. There are still a couple items we have worked. There have been some additional adjustments from June 9th. Tom's already mentioned one of them. We have discovered that we have an ability to refinance some of our debt favorably. So there have been some adjustments. The Board of Education have made some adjustments in their capital appropriations. We are going to finalize those recommendations. I think it's 10 o'clock Friday morning, Tom?
Yes.
So that, it's short notice for the meeting, but we will be doing that work Friday morning. And I think we'll share with the rest of the council what our recommendations are, that we will then probably work through that discussion next Wednesday night. Is there anything else, Tom, you'd add to that, or any committee members, John and Betsy?
No, I would just, for the comfort of council, in spite of a fair number of additional changes since last week, we're still appear to be landing at that same general spot. And so,
and we're set up fully funded of the COVID reserve, which is a separate line item now on the tax computation worksheet. So it's clear to folks that there is COVID funding in this budget.
yes.
Thanks, Peter. John? Counselor Clucci? Excuse me.
I've been consumed with the finance committee work. Aside from that, there's a main board meeting tomorrow where I think they'll elect some new officers. And yeah, looking forward to wrapping up this phase of the budget.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we're going to start work on review of the growth management ordinance. Just a reminder to folks, the way I structure my committee meetings is I give the first 15 minutes maximum to public input if there's any public input. Then we get to work, the 3 members of the committee, and then any other counselors who wish to attend. I do want to thank all of you for doing your homework. I apologize for putting it out like that, but I find it more helpful if I can get some idea of where people are coming from with this. And you're all really good about getting back to me. And the goal of tomorrow's meeting is to delineate where we think the issues are. So far, I'm hearing impact fees, fractionalization, reserve pool seem to be the three big ones, but we'll further delineate them. Jay was going to do a presentation. I believe that Larissa sent something out this afternoon. I apologize. I haven't caught up with my emails from this afternoon that had to do with.
That presentation was sent out this afternoon.
Okay, great. Awesome. Because I wanted that sent out in advance so you could take a look at it. I do apologize. Tomorrow I have a hard stop on that meeting at 5:15. But I think we'll be able to get enough done. And the follow-up meeting will be August 20th, which is the ordinance meeting, the regularly scheduled ordinance meeting in August at 4 o'clock. That'll give staff a chance to go back and then we will work on it further. I also want to make note that July 9th at 5 p.m. we're going to have a special ordinance meeting because we don't usually have ordinance in July to address the 5G. So that's just what's coming up with the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
We had a communications meeting. It was more or less a general discussion on the new website. The 3 committee members were given access to the new website, so we did a test run with it, gave some feedback, had a discussion with the IT folks. I do believe we're going to have a soft launch on that on July 6th. There'll be more to come on that in the e-newsletter, and I do believe on the leader.
Thank you, sir. I think the only thing I'll mention is, as far as leadership's concerned, meaning Dawn, myself, and Tom, we have met on a regular basis like usual. It's just hopefully Dawn will back me up. We're kind of at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So there isn't really too much in the pipeline. So I feel like we're all have been actively involved in this budget hand in hand. So please, if you haven't had an update from me, it's simply because we all know exactly all the same stuff right now. There hasn't been a third or fourth thing on the list, Dawn, I believe, right? I mean, it's really just been all budget work and yeah.
We're back to back with big issues. So, that's the reason for not a lot of news week to week.
Right. So I don't have much, there wasn't much of pipeline, so to speak. So the reason why we might not have the videos is A, we've actually moved to meeting in person. But B, the vast majority of the discussion has been the budget, which obviously all 7 of us have been looped in with on a constant basis. Councilor Hayes? Oh, you're on mute.
This is where if Councilor Ken Johnson wants to introduce his guest that's looking over his shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely has to go out. So
He has been looking at you longingly for quite some time.
You better make your comments short then.
Yeah. Okay, item number 11 is councilor member comments. I'm going to do what I did last time, and let's just raise your hand if you have some in the interest of time. Councilor Clucci.
I'll start. I would. It feels like I've aged 5 years in the past 3-4 months, and I just thought it might help to kind of catch us back up or regurgitate what we've gone through. When we initially had our budget goal meeting back the beginning of the year, I was frustrated meeting on a Sunday because I could have been skiing, but we unanimously agreed to come in at 3%. And I think we all felt pretty confident in that number at the time. And then the pandemic hit and the stock market plummeted, everybody's 401ks plummeted, and we unanimously came in at 2%, thinking that was probably the right middle ground given all the uncertainty that there was there at the time. I want to catch us up to where we are today. We're closer to 1%. We were not unanimous in that, but that was the consent of the council. The stock market, as of today, was down 7.8% year to date. It's no longer down 30%. The S&P is down 3.3%. So it's possibly not as dire a situation as we had initially found ourselves in. Personally, if we hit 50% revenue this year for my business, that's going to be a success. So I think there are some examples that of folks that are going to hit pretty hard with this, but I think the overall trajectory is encouraging. I think most people's portfolios anyways are probably flat to up right now. So I just wanted us to think about that as we go into next week in our final second reading. I think as we're trying to bring people together who are on two very different sides of this equation right now, if we can find a middle ground, I think that could go a long ways towards helping us pass the budget firsthand. And I say that understanding that right now there's some inequities in the budgets that I struggle with personally, where we have town staff taking pay cuts and municipal or school staff not, doing the same thing. I struggle with that. It makes it, fairness, I guess, is very important to me. So that's something that's difficult, but the overall number for me, we're maybe being a little bit too sharp with the razor. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and we'll obviously talk a couple more times before we have second read.
Thank you, sir. Any others? Okay. Councilor Hamel, you're on mute. Oh, no, you're not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just for purposes of counterpoint, glass half empty, glass half full. Yeah, the market bounced back, but it's a ridiculously bouncing ball. We thought we were in good shape in terms of COVID nationally, and things are spiking all over again. So, I mean, by nature, I'm an optimistic guy, but when it comes to financial things and uncertainty, I tend to be very cautious. So I would like to embrace the vision that Councilor Clucci has articulated, but I can't because we don't know what we don't know. And in that environment, I think we're trending to a number where we should be. So the thing I'm concerned about, and other people have talked about it, is it possible we're going to come up with a number that nobody likes, and we won't know how to decipher what that means if it's overwhelmingly voted down. But I think there are ways to deal with that. Maybe Goldilocks will come back out of the storied fable and help us decipher that. So I still think we're in a very kind of go slow, we don't know, let's be cautious mode. So, sorry to be hanging crepe, but that's, I'll just offer that as a counterpoint.
Any others? Councilor Gleisning?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started this whole thing and we're ending it at the same place is, one of the great unknowns is, what's going to happen with the state. The state is very clear that they will have major shortfalls. You can listen to the Appropriations Committee. You can go through the most recent numbers that they've released, which to me are pretty far behind, which is one thing that's kind of frustrating. They've only released March numbers up till now. They had a $240 million shortfall. They are expecting to recoup some of that revenue for sure. That is one that partially that was related to the delay in income tax, which is not coming up until July. So what they've done for the rest of for the rest of FY20, which is what we're in and which is what they're in, is they're kind of giving us our revenue sharing that they promised us. And the way they've laid this out is in order to do that, because revenues are really short, because we've been talking a lot about FY21, but you have to remember the economy of Maine basically shut down mid-March, and it's shut down all of May, and it's starting to come back partially in June. So hopefully the worst of it is behind, and things are starting to come back, but that's a lot of revenue that the state will not take in, especially from the sales tax. And that's revenue that will never be recovered because you can't ever stay in a hotel that wasn't open, et cetera, et cetera. But what the state has decided to do, as best of my understanding, is to use the rainy day fund that had funding to make sure that we're kept whole through FY20. So that's really good news because we did on our side in the town, if you've kept up, we took quite a few measures to save money in FY20. And why did we do that? Well, we did that so that we could pass some of those savings on to FY21. I've been somewhat disappointed, personally in the state that they have not taken similar cost saving measures. I don't think Maine is alone in that, so I'm not picking on Maine. But, they haven't gathered a lot of savings on the state side. So once we get past FY20, they're going to be in a new budget cycle. I know Jean Marie's been talking to folks in the state, probably some of the others have. We early on heard from our legislators, and you know, certainly they have the intent to give the revenue to the state, to the towns that they've promised. Whether or not they're going to be able to do that, all you have to do is look around at all the municipal budgets. I would encourage folks to do that. You know, run some headlines, you know, for all of the towns in the area to see why are they coming up with the numbers they're coming up with, and the spending increases or decreases depending on how they're being impacted. Well, it's largely two reasons. One, they're concerned about the economy in terms of people's ability to pay and businesses still existing. But secondly, people are being realistic about revenue. And we have had to make that adjustment on our side with revenue. Tom has looked at that very carefully because we get about $20 million or more from other sources of revenue. So I think we've been, you know, fairly, you know, we probably haven't cut it as much as I've wanted. We probably perhaps cut it more than some people, but we're going based on the judgment of Tom, which I think is a fair thing to do. If revenues don't come in where we want, then we're all going to be looking at curtailments, furloughs, using fund balance and things like that. That's one reason it's so important that we had to take some of those cuts. So when we look at this year and we talk about 0%, I would like folks to understand that, you know, that just looking at the bottom line, if we were really going to get the same revenue that we've been promised, you know, we're at a negative point on the mill rate. Unfortunately, we don't believe we're going to get all the revenue that we've been promised. So we've had to adjust that. And that's the numbers that we've been looking at. But I'd like to say on the aspect of what John alluded to, I do have major concerns still that, you know, we're putting too much of the burden on the town. You know, I know the school has looked carefully at their budget, but it still feels to me, and I think to many people in town, that there really is a dire, some things that could impact the town in a dire way in the long term, and especially this inequity and unfairness that we're seeing with town folks stepping up to say, this is what we're going to do for not cuts. No one's asking anybody to cut their pay, but we've asked for, can you take a little bit less increase? So there's been reductions in the increases that people normally get. And I know if you're from the private sector and you're hearing this, or you're from a nonprofit like me, you know, we don't get increases every year. The municipal sector works a little differently. It is one thing kind of built in that folks, you know, one of the reasons it's an attractive job for people is there are a lot of increases, you know, for COLA and things like that, steps. So we're used to that. But we did have on the town side people step up, and then we had Tom take his entire staff that are non-union and say, well, they're gonna really step up to the plate. So I appreciate that, but I have to say I have really big concerns around that. And if we're impacting morale, when we've got on the other side, the school budget, the other town employees that really are still in with increases of anywhere between 2 to 5%. I won't quote, but there's it's a very complicated formula of how it works over there. So I do have a very big concern with that, and I hope that people understand, you know, kind of where we're at in terms of the revenue. You know, definitely be calling your state legislators and saying, give us the money that you promised. I mean, this could dig us out of a lot of holes if people do that. And I know MMA is advocating for that, but the legislators I've talked with, and I haven't talked to ours in a while, but some from around the other towns, you know, everyone is realistic. You know, they are not going to have the same money. The question becomes, how can that money be backfilled? You know, is it going to come from a different source? And then the state can eventually pass it on to the municipalities. But, you know, at this point, we've been given no information from the state, very little to none. You know, they've decided to wait until the fall to kind of figure out what's going on. That's really tough for the municipalities. They also exempted themselves from meeting they don't meet either. We still meet. So, municipalities all over the state, I think, are feeling the pressure of trying to put together a budget with great uncertainties. And so I hope people understand that and understand how this process has gone. It's been far from perfect. I'm certainly not patting us on the back. I think we could sign up for plenty of flagellation if we want. It's been a very crazy year, and I hope some of the explanation is helpful.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to order number 20057. It's an act on the request for an executive session pursuant to Title I of the MRSA 4056C regarding a personnel matter relating to the town manager's employment agreement, not to come back to public session, not to come back to public session to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
And before I call the vote, just quickly, everybody has the executive session link in your email. I am not going to open the executive session until 7:20. So if you try to click on it, you won't be able to get on it for a couple minutes because I have to close this out and stop the recording. And Councilor Johnson has to take his dog out. So what's that?
We have 7:25.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. All right. So it starts at 7:25 for all those on there. Tony, you want to call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Glycine,
Yes.
Counselor Katerina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel.
Yep.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.